going to air it out. Down the field. Catch and the touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. It is Week 13, rivalry week. We are now at the end of the regular season here in college football. Conference championships are next week. Happy belated Thanksgiving to all out there. Hope you had a wonderful Thursday night, Thursday afternoon, whenever you guys chow down and, of course, spend time with your family and friends and loved ones. But now we get into the good stuff of this final weekend here in November, and that's rivalry weekend. And where else were we going to start but Ohio State and Michigan? Now, there was plenty of other stuff that went on, especially in the Big Ten, over the course of the week. Of course, Mel Tucker of Michigan State officially signed his contract. I know we hammered that hard last week about Michigan State actually offering him this 10-year, $95 million extension. He did sign that. He put pen to paper. James Franklin now out of the running of some of these other big jobs as well because he has re-upped with Penn State as well. He also signed a 10-year deal. He's going to get paid $7 million annually. So I believe he, with a bonus, there are some kind of bonuses as well. I have to look at the fine print once again, but it looks like he's around a 10-year, $70 million deal. Either way, they both signed 10-year deals. They're going to be facing off against each other for the next decade. And, of course, they face each other today as well when Penn State visits East Lansing at 3:30. And we actually have one of those games in our 5 picks segment, of course, which will come at the end of the show, 34, 25, and 1 on the season. We had a 3-2 week last week, bounced back a little bit in Week 12 with winners from UCLA, Baylor, and Oklahoma just last week. So we'll unpack those 5 picks later in the show. But for now, it's rivalry weekend, and we know where we're starting. It's Ohio State and Michigan. It's as simple as that. Now, the 2 biggest games to me, at least in my mind, I mean, there are plenty of rivalries. Oregon State, Oklahoma State, Florida State. But the 2 that always stick out to me every single season, I know it's almost chalk to do it this way because they're the 2 biggest games, I would say, that are promoted. That's Ohio State and Michigan, which is the game, and of course Auburn and Alabama, the Iron Bowl. Those 2 games to me are the biggest ones of the week. Every single season, no matter where the teams are. I mean, look at Alabama and Auburn. That line right now, minus 20 for Alabama on the road going to Jordan-Hare Stadium, and they're 20-point favorites. That's because Auburn's 6-5. Bama's number 3 in the country. They're on their way to go to the playoff if they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game next week. But it's the Iron Bowl. Anything can happen in that one. But what we're going to focus on mostly throughout this first segment is Ohio State and Michigan, because this has the biggest implications for the playoff as well as the Big Ten itself. Now, the Big Ten, there are 4 teams left in the Big Ten that can compete for a championship. Over in the West, it's Iowa and Minnesota, while for the East, it's Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State and Michigan, this is it. This is it, folks. It's the big cheese. This is it. We haven't seen a game this big between these 2 teams since 2016, I would say. I will pull up the recent history, which is pretty much dominated by Ohio State with this game. Now, it's interesting right now because Ohio State's an 8-point favorite on the road going to Ann Arbor. But this one has a lot more intrigue this year because despite the fact that Michigan dropped their game to Michigan State, they've dominated since then. And a lot of people have made the argument, well, they blew that one, and if they were able to hang on just ever so slightly, you might be talking about these 2 teams both making the playoff no matter who wins the Big Ten. You never know. But this pretty much knocks out. The loser's out. The winner goes to the Big Ten championship and, of course, has the best chance to get to the playoff. So I just try to pull up results here. So let's look at the last. Jim Harbaugh has never beaten this team. He's never beaten this team. And dating back to 2012, Ohio State's won every single matchup. while Ryan Day for Ohio State, he hasn't been here as long as Jim Harbaugh, but since he's taken over as coach of the Buckeyes, he's never lost a Big Ten game. The Buckeyes have never lost a game within their own conference since Ryan Day took over. So something does have to give today, whether it's Ryan Day's first Big Ten loss, and that very well could be Jim Harbaugh's first first win over Ohio State. So what's going to happen today? Can that scenario happen today? 2011 is the last time Michigan won a game in this series. 40-34 at home. They were ranked number 15, and they got the win. Last year's game, there was no game last year because of COVID, so you go back to 2019. 56-27, Ohio State wins. The year before that, 62-39, Ohio State wins. The year before that, 31-20. These games haven't even been that competitive. 2017 was relatively competitive in Ann Arbor, but the biggest game, or the best game between the two of them, has always been 2016. If you're talking about recent memory, aside from 06 is that legendary game when they were 1-2 and Ohio State won 42-39. But 2016 has some recent history in it that just has I want to say a domino effect, because that game turned everything on its head. Then they were number 2, Ohio State. Michigan was number 3. This game's in Columbus. Michigan has the lead in this game. Eventually goes to overtime. They have the lead in overtime. And then, of course, whether you're a Michigan fan or an Ohio State fan, you can at least acknowledge the run on 4th down by quarterback J.T. Barrett for the Buckeyes was controversial because where he was spotted, now Michigan fans will say he's short, Ohio State fans will say he got the first down. As a neutral observer, to me, when I first saw it 5 years ago, I thought he was short. You'd have to go back and watch it 1,000 times to really dissect it, but it's just a matter of opinion. But what happened in that game, he got the first down. He ruled that he had the first down, and then Curtis Samuel scored on the very next play. Ohio State wins. They go to the Big Ten championship game, and they end up going to the playoff as well. That was Jim Harbaugh's best shot at this team, and it hasn't been good since then. They've lost by double digits in the last 3 meetings, and who knows what's going to happen today. I'm actually staying away from this game from a betting perspective because Ohio State is an 8-point favorite on the road. Now, could I see this game being close? Absolutely. But could I also see Ohio State blowing them out? Yeah, absolutely as well. The problem is, it depends on the situation, but I hate taking these huge road favorites. And to me, in a game like this where Ohio State's 2 in the country and Michigan is number 5 in the country, that it's more than a touchdown at 8 points. I'm not totally comfortable with taking the Buckeyes there, even though they could very well run this game, run away from the Wolverines within the first half. You saw what they did to Michigan State last week. 56-7. They were up 49-0 at halftime. I'm not saying that's going to happen again, but that's just brutal. It just shows you the power that Ohio State has. Being able to beat up on a team like Michigan State like that last week with ease. It was in Columbus, I get it, but with ease like that, that is just absolutely absurd. Can you imagine if they do that in Ann Arbor today? This game's right at noon, folks. So you get this game right off the bat. Now, I'm looking forward to it because I think Michigan actually is better than people are giving them credit for. That running game is elite. And if Blake Corum is back and just is healthy in any capacity, it's only going to help because they have Hassan Haskins back there as well. Donovan Edwards, the true freshman, didn't really run the ball well last week, but he was a dangerous man in the receiving game. So you add if you have all these weapons back there, and then depending on how Cade McNamara / J.J. McCarthy play at quarterback, I'll tell you what, they can play ball control and they can grind out this game. They have a great defense too. Don't forget, Michigan does have a great defense. Ojabo and Hutchinson are 2 of the best pass rushers in the country, and they're going to try to make the day really bad and hectic for quarterback C.J. Stroud, who had his own Heisman moment last week against Michigan State, tossing 6 touchdowns and just dicing up a pretty good Spartans defense. But does Michigan break the losing streak against Ohio State? I am not sure, because it's been 8 in a row. It's been 8 in a row, and it's just brutal to watch every single season because the last time they won was 2011 Michigan, 140-34. And even the year before that, the years before that, let's see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times before that, they lost to Ohio State. So you're talking, if I can do my math right here, you're talking 15 of the last 16 games between these two schools have been won by Ohio State. 2003, Michigan wins in Ann Arbor. The 2 years before that, Ohio State wins. And then once you go back to 2000 and before, that's where Michigan mostly dominated this series. So let me do some quick math for you. This is why this game is tough to always bet because of the recent history you're talking about. I mean, you could take Ohio State. A lot of people will take Ohio State, even though they're an 8-point favorite on the road, because they very well could blow them out. That's been the trend as of late. Of course, 2013 it was 42-21. 2014, but other than 2013 and 2016 and 2011, where Michigan won, by the way, in the last 8 games. And the last 8 games where Ohio State beat Michigan, 3 of them were one-score games. 2012, 2013, and 2016. Other than that, they've blown them out. Especially under Jim Harbaugh since 2015, there's been one close game. Other than that, they've blown them out. And I wouldn't consider 2017 that much of a blowout because it was 31-20, but still, it was double digits. So people are going to take Ohio State. But this is why it's ridiculous. Ohio State's closed the gap on the all-time series, which I found that's very interesting. So 15 of the last 16 games are in favor of Ohio State. Now, technically, 2010 is vacated. Ohio State had vacated those games. So we'll just consider it 14 of the last 15 then. All right? 14 of the last 15, which means Michigan had a 57-37 lead in the series. It's now 58-51. They've closed the gap. So again, this is my look but don't touch game today. But the way Ohio State's playing, I would lean towards them today. I'll stay away from it. I'll stay away from it from a betting perspective. But as far as if I'm just going to pick a winner, I am going to pick Ohio State on the road. But it's a rough contest, folks. This is a rough one. This game very well could go the other way. If Michigan wins, I mean, this changes everything about Jim Harbaugh, in my mind. Because it'll validate the quote-unquote contract extension they gave him at the end of last year where they were like, all right, it's incentive-heavy. If they win this game, Michigan, they're going to vault to probably the number 2 team in the country. They would totally jump Cincinnati. And they would jump up to number 2. And obviously, depending upon what happens with Alabama and Georgia next week, Michigan has the inside track for a top 2 seed, in my mind. If Ohio State wins, they're going to say the number 2. If Michigan wins, I say they jump up to number 2. It'd be the best win of the year. And they'd be 11-1. Then they would play for a Big Ten championship game, which Harbaugh's never done, by the way. He's never done that as coach of the Wolverines. They've never played in the Big Ten championship game. So this would change everything. And in my mind, whether they get Iowa or Wisconsin, they are going to. The East winner is going to be the favorite. So a lot's riding on here. Now, if Harbaugh falls short in this game, well, they're going to fall at 10-2. They're going to get a quality bowl game. Might get a New Year's Six game. So they can end the season on a high note, 11-2, be a top 10 team. That's fine. But they're going to always say, you didn't beat Ohio State again. You didn't beat Michigan State. Fell short. Your 2 losses this year to the 2 big boys over there. Fell short again. So what do they do after that? Would they get rid of Jim Harbaugh after a hypothetical 11-2 season where they win a New Year's Six bowl? I don't think so. But they might say, look, you can do whatever you want next year, but if you do not win the Big Ten next year, you're gone. I can totally see that happening. But who knows? Who knows? He isn't. He's a Michigan legend as a player. It's a very delicate situation because any other school this year would have taken the season they are having, except Michigan for the most part, because they lost to Michigan State, and they could very well lose to Ohio State today as well. But I got Ohio State winning today. It's as simple as that. Betting perspective, I don't know. I would stay away just because of the 8 points. That's just me today. I'm not a fan of it today. Over-under set at 64.5. I would say the over does hit there. I think we're going to see about maybe like a 42-35 type of game. Michigan can score points. They can score points. They just do it differently than Ohio State. All right, let's quickly look at the Alabama-Auburn game, the Iron Bowl. Now, only from the perspective of there's a chance this is an upset. Some people might think that just because it's in Auburn, but a 20-point favorite. Now, this game to me is one of the best of the year anyway, but the way Alabama's playing this year, they're going to be just too much. They're a 20-point favorite today at 3:30. One thing you have to focus on, though, they were jumped. So this is what the committee thinks of the way Ohio State's playing right now. In the latest rankings, Alabama dropped from number 2 to number 3. Now, they have only lost to Texas A&M. They play at 7 o'clock tonight. They're the number 15 team in the country, so it's still a quality loss. But the committee considers Ohio State's loss to Oregon better, and Ohio State has jumped Oregon at this point because Oregon did lose the second game. Oregon's down to number 11. But Ohio State's domination of Michigan State in the eyes of the committee was just a lot better, and I agree. I agree with that, and they deserve to be over Alabama at this point because they also lost. They lost an out-of-conference game. They have not lost in conference. Well, Alabama did lose in conference. Now, you can make the argument that, well, losing in conference is a better loss than losing out of conference. It's true, but Ohio State technically has the better loss because Oregon is ranked above Texas A&M. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens after this week. Now, if they both win, they're both going to stay. In Georgia, I can't see them getting upset by Georgia Tech. So the top three are going to stay the same there. And now it's a matter of, all right, if Alabama was the number 2 team going into next week, say they lost to Georgia, could Alabama become the first 2-loss team to make the playoff? They would have a better shot. But the fact that they dropped a spot coming into this week, that to me eliminates all possibility that they are going to make the playoff as a 2-loss team. Now, something absolutely crazy would have to happen. They'd have to play a classic game against Georgia, lose by maybe a point in overtime or something, and then you need the Big Ten winner to have 2 losses at least. And then somehow the Big 12 winner has 2 losses, whether it's Oklahoma State, or Baylor. However it shakes out, the Big 12 winner has to have 2 losses. And you basically need total implosion around you, including from Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame would have to lose to Stanford today. They don't play a conference title game, but Notre Dame would have to lose as well. They would lose the second game. Then they could still make the playoff. I think they still could, but they would have had a better shot at that if they were number 2 going into this week. The fact that they're number 3 hurts their case now, and they basically have to win out and beat Georgia. Now, if they beat Georgia, Georgia's going to get in as well, in my mind, because Georgia is undefeated, the number 1 team. They've been the consensus number 1 for pretty much the entire season. So if you go into next week and it's 12-0 Georgia and it's 11-1 Alabama, 1 versus 3, then you are going to see, or 1 versus 2. Maybe if Michigan beats Ohio State, Michigan only moves up to number 3 and Bama goes back to 2. You never know. But either way, you're going to get a 1 versus 3 or a 1 versus 2 matchup next week, as long as they both win. And if Alabama wins, Georgia is absolutely going to get in as the 4th seed. It's going to be interesting how everything else shakes out through this week and conference championship week, but I can tell you right now, if Bama beats Georgia next week, they're both going to get in. So if you're Bama, you just have to avoid the upset today. That's pretty much all it is. You don't have to win by style points. You just win. They know it's your arch rival. There are no style points here. Now, for bettors, of course, you would want them to cover the 20 points. I think that could very well happen. Auburn has been good this year, but I remember a couple weeks ago there was talk about, well, if the way Auburn's schedule shakes out, if they actually won out, they would make it to the SEC championship game at 10-2, and then they would actually be able to play Georgia for the title. If they beat Georgia, wouldn't they make the playoff at 11-2? Yeah, there was actually talk that Auburn could be the first 2-loss team to make the playoff. It was set up for them, but guess what happened? They've lost 3 in a row. No, so to me, Alabama should roll over them. I don't know about covering the 20. This is another game I'm staying away from. The rivalry games, to me, from a betting perspective, unless I love the line, I'm going to stay away from it right now. So I'm staying away from Ohio State, staying away from Alabama-Auburn. Total on this one is 57, so that is, I would say that's a good bet to hit the over as well. Alabama's going to put up at least 40 in my mind. I'll give Auburn credit, say they're going to put up at least 20. They do have some good players. They've just been in a rut. That's pretty much all it is. All right, folks. So rivalry weekend is upon us. We are just a few hours away. We're going to take you up to 9 o'clock today. But for now, we're going to step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we'll talk about some other tidbits and rumblings. And, of course, we'll dive into Mel Tucker and James Franklin's contracts, what that means moving forward as well, what it means for the other coaching vacancies as well. And, of course, to end the show, I'll give you my 5 picks. See if we can end the regular season on a high note, and then we'll go into conference championship weekend on a hot streak. How about that? We all love that. All right, listen to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Back here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm Nick Kosko with you. We're taking up to 9 a.m. rivalry weekend here in college football. And, of course, we are always presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. All right, rivalry weekend. Did enough about Ohio State and Alabama and Auburn. Ohio State-Michigan is the game of the day, I would say, of course. Number 2 versus number 5 in Ann Arbor. But some other news came across the wire over the course of the week in the Big Ten. And that was James Franklin and Mel Tucker both officially signing their contract extensions. And now this really affects the coaching carousel going into the 2021 offseason as we approach the next year of college. I can't believe we're already talking about that. The next year of college football. This year is not even over yet, of course. You know, we're talking about who's going to coach at LSU, who's going to coach at USC, who's getting the Virginia Tech job. You know, there are plenty of who's getting the Florida job. By the way, this happened after. This happened just the day after we went off the air. Dan Mullen was fired at Florida. Of course, you know, since we do a weekly show here, folks, so that news is a bit old, at least for someone to me who covers college football for a living. But yeah, Dan Mullen was fired as well. So Florida is now an open job. And there's an argument that Florida could be the best opening out of all of them over LSU and USC. Virginia Tech, just to name a few. I mean, there are plenty of openings across the way, but the 4 big ones are the ones that I just mentioned. But now you have 2 big candidates from the Big Ten, which, don't get me wrong, they had huge jobs anyway, Michigan State and Penn State. But now Mel Tucker and James Franklin are off the board. They're off the board. Unless Florida or USC or LSU is going to come back and say, all right, well, they give you a 10-year, 90. I mean, you signed it, but how about we'll buy you out. We'll buy out your entire contract. We'll give you another 10-year deal. It's not going to happen now, of course. I mean, that'd be absolutely ludicrous. I mean, then we'd be talking about something that's going to be historic for the next 50 years or something like that actually happened. But you look at Mel Tucker and James Franklin, both 10-year extensions with their respective schools, Michigan State and Penn State. And now not only are they going to be facing each other today, they're going to be facing each other for the next decade within the same division. But now, where do you go from here if you are USC, LSU, Florida, and others right now? Well, because James Franklin was definitely a candidate for LSU and USC. His name was thrown out there a lot. Mel Tucker's name was thrown out there a lot for LSU as well. Because these guys are program builders. Now, Franklin has proved it over a longer period of time. You know, he rebuilt Vanderbilt, built them into a solid team in the SEC East. And he came over to Penn State, and he took over a Penn State team that was in the shadow of the Jerry Sandusky scandal. Joe Paterno obviously passed away at that time as well. But Penn State was an absolute mess. When he came in, he rebuilt them, and he actually won a Big Ten championship with Penn State that year. Let's not forget that. And with that, he was probably the better candidate, on paper at least, because of his history, to take over a team like USC or LSU. And now, by the way, speaking of coaching contracts, Dave Aranda, by the way, the Baylor head coach, they are reportedly close on a contract extension. So you want to talk about taking away another candidate for a team like LSU or a school like LSU? Dave Aranda was even at LSU. He was the defensive coordinator for them when they won the national championship just 2 years ago. And then he was hired away by Baylor. He has built Baylor into a fast-rising contender in the Big 12. They're 9-2 this year. They're a top 15 team, and they're getting close on a contract extension. So what's going to happen now with LSU? They basically lost their top 3 candidates right there. Now they're going to still zero in on Billy Napier, according to reports. Try to drag him out, keep him in state, but they'll take him away from Louisiana Monroe. That's where they'll take him from there. They'll keep him in state. Billy Napier has been a hot name for not for LSU necessarily, but for other big Power 5 coaching jobs. He's done a tremendous job at Louisiana. Tremendous job, Billy Napier. Now LSU also has the big fish on their, we'll call it, in their sights right now. Jimbo Fisher over Texas A&M and Oklahoma's Lincoln Riley. Now they want the big name. They want the big name. Matt Campbell's out there from Iowa State. He's out there as well. But the fact now is Mel Tucker's gone. James Franklin's gone. Dave Aranda's about to be gone. So who's left? Billy Napier and Matt Campbell are probably your more realistic options if you're LSU. The big fish or Jimbo Fisher to prime away from a in-division rival, or you pry away Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma. I don't think any of those are going to happen. Now, the only out of those I just mentioned, Billy Napier or Matt Campbell would make the most sense to me and the most likely to happen, especially since Dave Aranda is about to sign a new deal with Baylor. As far as USC is concerned, I have no idea where they're going. No idea. There was rumblings that they could bring in Mario Cristobal from Oregon, try to make him jump ship from one Pac-12 job to another. Oh, and by the way, folks, I almost forgot. I mentioned it last week, but Washington's open too, so you have another huge job open. And there was rumblings about Chip Kelly. He was on uneven ground with UCLA, but they got the win last week. But he might have not been able to return next year. But Washington was supposedly interested in him. So there's a lot going on. But now a lot of these big fish are gone because they're staying where they are. Now, I said last week, does Mel Tucker necessarily deserve, we're kind of jumping all over the place with these guys, but it's all linked though, folks. But I mentioned last week, I said to myself, does Mel Tucker actually deserve this contract? Now, good for him. Good for him. I mean, even Deion Sanders was like, wow, you deserve it. Congratulations. And Deion Sanders, of course, Pro Football Hall of Famer, coaches at Jackson State right now. His name was thrown out early on in the coaching cycle for some schools, maybe like the TCU job, but they're supposedly zeroing in on Sonny Dykes to get him from SMU. So if you want these, to me, I'll stick with Tucker for a second here. That contract, now you can also debate whether Franklin deserves a 10-year extension, because since last year they have been pretty much just a slightly above average football team, Penn State. But at least James Franklin has the history to back it up. He's had successful seasons. They've won big bowl games. He's won a Big Ten championship game. In a conference that's been dominated by Ohio State over the last 10 years, Penn State did win a Big Ten title under Franklin. So I think at least Franklin deserves that contract extension just a little bit more. But for Mel Tucker, he's 16-14 overall as a head coach. Don't forget, Michigan State hired him away after 1 year at Colorado where he went 5-7. Everyone questioned the hire then, and they weren't even that good last year. And again, even if you were great last year, it was just a weird year, of course, with the COVID-19 season, protocols in place. You're playing a conference-only schedule for most teams, or most schools are playing conference-only schedules. Nobody's playing 12 games last year unless you go deep in the playoffs or something along those lines. So it was weird, but they played very well this year. They're 9-2 right now, but they've had two bad losses. The upset loss to Purdue, they were really never in that game, so to speak, and then of course the loss to Ohio State is just brutal. And that came on the heels of the reports coming out about his contract. So it was just a bad look by all. He's 11-7 at Michigan State, Tucker. 16-14 overall. This guy was 2-5 last year as Michigan State's head coach. And you mean to tell me he is just 2 games over 500 in 3 years at 2 different schools, and you think he's worth 10 years, $95 million? Okay. I don't agree with that, but knock yourself out. Has he done a great job this year? Yes. Should they have given him a contract extension based on this year alone? Yeah, I'd say so. They probably had to because, say, if LSU wanted him. Like, wow, he turned Michigan State around in just a year two. They were in the playoff hunt for a majority of the season. All right, if I'm LSU or USC and I see that, I'm like, yeah, I think I want that guy. In just 2 years, they're in contention for a Big Ten title. In contention for a college football playoff spot. Yeah, I want that guy. So I understand Michigan State's motives behind this contract extension. Yeah, we should probably sign him to a big long-term deal to prevent him from going somewhere else. That I understand. That logic I can understand, and I think I understand that as well from the James Franklin point of view as well. Where again, he deserved it more than Tucker did. But at least Penn State could say, you know what, there were questions about his future, and then of course Franklin had more of a. I want to say his name was thrown out there a little bit more than Tucker's because, again, Franklin was linked to LSU. He was linked to USC as well. So there was more rumblings about Franklin going somewhere else, particularly to USC, where they could just back up the truck and say, here's a blank check, put your name down, and write a figure that you want. That's pretty much how it works for USC if they want to go get James Franklin. So I can understand the logic from both schools saying, all right, we need to sign our guy to a long-term deal, big money. He won't go anywhere until the next big coaching cycle where someone else might be able to say, hey, we're going to give you even more money. We'll give you an 8-year deal worth more than what you're making on this deal, or whatever the case may be. So I understand it from that perspective. If you can use that logic, I get it. But because now they are locked up, and of course I just mentioned Dave Aranda is also about to get locked up as well. I mean, what's going to happen now? Where do you go to next? I didn't even mention Luke Fickell. Didn't even mention Luke Fickell. And then he is reportedly staying with Cincinnati. Because now that Florida opened up, they were like, well, USC might be in on him, but the way Luke Fickell has coached Cincinnati over the past few years, especially the last few years, maybe the Florida Gators go after Luke Fickell. But earlier this week on Wednesday, Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports, he said Fickell's going to probably stay at Cincinnati. USC and Florida definitely be interested in him. Now, LSU, I'm surprised they didn't pop up amid the Luke Fickell coaching rumors, but I could easily see a school like USC or Florida trying to get this guy into their program. But what Fickell's been able to do with this school as a group of 5 school, and the fact that they are joining the Big 12 in just a few years, at this point, if Cincinnati can make you a big offer, he is more of a hometown type of guy. You know, he's one of those, he seems to have that old school mentality. And I guess unless, a Big 10 job opened up that was worth it to him in his mind, he would leave, like Ohio State. And the guy's an Ohio State lifer. Like if that job somehow opened up, let's say if for some reason Ryan Day left. I mean, at this point, Ryan Day would never leave Ohio State unless he's going to go to the NFL and he finds it to be the right opportunity. Ryan Day did coach in the NFL before, don't forget, as an assistant. But unless the Ohio State job opened up, why would Luke Fickell ever leave Cincinnati? With the success he's had there, the fact they're going to be in the Big 12 in a few years, at this point, he can become a Cincinnati lifer. He's close to home anyway. He's in the same state. He's in the same state anyway, so why would Luke Fickell leave? This coaching carousel has been very interesting because a lot of these big names where you think they could switch schools, they're staying right where they are. It's totally different now. They want this long-term job security, and their own schools are going to give it to them. So am I surprised that Fickell would stay at Cincinnati? No. No, I'm not surprised at all. If you're that successful in your own conference and then you can prove it in a new conference in a few years, which it's not going to happen until 2025, so we still have to wait a few more years. Got to wait 4 more years before it's July 2025. Excuse me, I think it's, let's see. Yeah. I'm reading the release now just to get this out of the way. Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and BYU, they're going to be in there no later than the 2024-25 athletic year. So by the 2024 college football season, all 4 of those could be in the Big 12. And then much easier for schools like that to have great seasons and go to the college football playoff. And then look at that, you're a Big 12 school, you're a Power 5 institution across the board. So what's the problem? Why would you leave elsewhere? Big 12 the Big 12 is still a great conference overall. I know Oklahoma and Texas are leaving, but you still have big name schools in that conference as well. So unless somebody else is going to back the truck up for you, like USC or even Florida, why would you leave? But he's going to stay at Cincinnati, according to reports. That's the way it goes. And now, again, so I get the logic of these coaches saying, and I'm pretty sure that's why David Reyes were going to end up staying at Baylor anyway. I mean, he said he wanted to stay at Baylor. Pretty sure he's reportedly said that in the past, that he wants to stay at Baylor, doesn't want to jump ship after 2 years anyway. So I get that, and David Reyes is one of those guys where it doesn't seem like he's going to be the flashy type of coach for a school like USC. I can see him. I could have seen him going back to LSU. That would have been understandable. But if you want to stay at Baylor, that's fine. He could have this team competing for the Big 12 for the next few years at this point. And once Oklahoma and Texas leave, Baylor could be the superpower of the Big 12 at this point, the way he's been able to coach up this program. The biggest question now is, what does Florida do? With all these guys staying where they are, what does Florida do? Now, they'll have their big fish. They'll try to get some guys that are, Bob Stoops was reportedly not in the running, but they were reportedly interested in Bob Stoops, but he doesn't want to leave retirement right now. He's on TV right now, so why would you leave? If he's going to pay you big money, why would you leave? I mean, Urban Meyer left TV, but he went to go to the NFL. It was the Jacksonville Jaguars said, hey, we'll give you a lot of money. You're going to get the number 1 overall pick, and you're going to be able to coach in the NFL for the first time in your life. I don't think Bob Stoops is going to do that for Florida, to be honest with you. I don't know where Florida goes from here. They're going to try to bring in a big name head coach. I don't know what direction they're going to go in, but it will certainly be interesting to see how the Gators operate since they got rid of Dan Mullen with 1 game left. 1 game left. I get they lost. Not a good loss to Missouri. It just doesn't look good. You got Eli Drinkwitz trolling you. Stinks. That stinks if you're Florida. Now Florida might be in on the Billy Napier sweepstakes. Yeah, just what Swamp 24/7 is reporting, by the way. The Florida site of the 24/7 Sports Network. Billy Napier is going to be probably on their list. There could be, this is coming from last night actually, and I'll read this. Let's see. They're thinking, sources for Swamp 27 are thinking that Florida and Napier are actually pretty deep in that negotiation stage. Now, if that's the case, then Napier could be the guy for Florida, and they could steal him right underneath of LSU's feet. They could very well do that. So that'll be interesting if Florida goes in that direction. Now, Napier's been great. Now, Billy Napier at this point, he's very happy with his current job at Louisiana. He's doing a great job at Louisiana and the Raging Cajuns. He's been there since 2018. The only Florida ties he has, by the way, he coached at Florida State as the tight ends coach back in 2013. But as coach of Louisiana, he started 8-12. They won the conference title last year. Finished number 15 in the AP poll. Billy Napier's probably the hottest commodity right now on the coaching market. I don't know where anybody else was. I don't know where else you're going to go right now. With all these guys staying, Matt Campbell might switch, but if you're Florida, would you rather have Billy Napier or would you rather have Matt Campbell? You'd rather have Billy Napier right now. So it's going to be a very fascinating end. We're going to know more about the coaching carousel after this weekend. So usually Sunday, which is tomorrow, usually that's the day where coaches get fired, where more deals are getting reported. It's going to be a hectic news day in college football once rivalry weekend is over, because once you head to the conference championship weekend, that is where you're focused on the teams that can. You're focused only on a select few teams. At that point, the bowl games have been mostly filled out, and then you're just waiting for bowl season if you're a fan of a team that's not in the conference title game, and if your team actually made a bowl game this year. So tomorrow's going to be hectic. We're going to recap a lot of we're going to dive more into the coaching carousel next week as we talk about the conference championship games as well. But Billy Napier, he's your top guy right now. I'd say with all these guys staying where they are, Billy Napier is the top candidate right now to go anywhere, whether it be LSU or it's Florida. I think those are the two options on the table for him if he is going to go anywhere. But again, he loves Louisiana. He's done a great job with them. And despite the fact that they are in the Sun Belt Conference, this team is a top 20 team pretty much every year. I mean, they're 10-1 this year. Louisiana's 10-1 this year. I mean, he has double-digit wins since getting there. Aside from the first year, they actually ended up 7-4. They lost they've been to the conference championship game in the Sun Belt every year. But they went 7-7 in 2018. Since then, 11-3, 10-1, 10-1, and they're still playing this year. So there you go. We'll see what happens with Billy Napier. All right, we're going to step aside, take one last break. On the other side, we'll dive into my 5 picks of the week, 34, 25, and 1 on the season. Let's have a great rivalry weekend in these picks, and we'll see what happens as we shake out into conference championship weekend next week as well. Keep it locked here. It's College Football Pick'em right on AM 1490, Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Back here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Nick Kosko with you, and we're going to give you my 5 picks of the week. Rivalry weekend. 34, 25, and 1 on the year. And, of course, we are always presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. All right, 5 games on the docket, some heated rivalries. We are staying away from Ohio State-Michigan and Alabama-Auburn. Lines not to my liking this week with those road favorites. Ohio State, an 8-point favorite on the road, and Alabama, a 20-point favorite on the road at Auburn. Not a fan of those this week, but I am a fan of these 5 games. And we're going to start out with, of course, my alma mater, Maryland at Rutgers. Scarlet Knights, 1 game away from bowl eligibility. So are the Terps. Both teams 5-6. This game is in Piscataway. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights, of course, coming off a bad 28-0 loss to Penn State. Maryland got blown out by Michigan just last week as well. So both teams reeling from last week, but both have earned a handful of victories this season that make you go, all right, well, this team could be playing post Week 13 this year. And at this point, this is more of a personal bet here, which you should really never do. But Rutgers is they are underdogs actually at home. Line's only at 1.5, so it's practically a pick 'em. And of course, I think Rutgers is going to win this game outright. Even from a slightly unbiased perspective, I think they do win this football game. Greg Schiano gets his team back to the postseason for the first time since 2014, and it would be Schiano's first bowl game since he was first here at Rutgers before he left after the 2011 season. So Rutgers could go bowling. It's possible. I think it's going to happen today. Of course, if Maryland wins, they will go bowling as well, but we'll go with Rutgers. My Scarlet Knights plus 1.5 at home. They're going bowling, not dancing. They're going bowling here in this 2021 college football season. It's going to be great. 6-6 a year, and only his second year back. Oh, but you would love to see it. Overall, just on a side note, it's been successful for Schiano here in his second year of his second stint. So I'm not totally pleased with some of the outcomes as a fan and alum, but hey, they're trending in the right direction, and they could certainly erase the bad taste in their mouths of that loss to Penn State, and of course the blowout loss to Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, if they happen to win this game today and go to a bowl game for the first time in 7 years. Gotta love it. Love to see it. So Rutgers plus 1.5. Florida State at Florida. We talked a lot about Florida in the previous segment because they just fired Dan Mullen. Who knows where they go from here, but they are both these teams, by the way, are 5-6, so the winner does go to a bowl game, and the winner does not. They go home. And who would have thought about that? Even though Florida, they were actually a sneaky pick for me to really contend for the SEC East once again this year. Maybe finish out 8-4, 9-3 this year, realistically. But they're 5-6. It's just gone downhill. But they do have this game at home. They're only 2.5-point favorites. I'm inclined to take the Gators here because, again, I don't fully trust Florida State. They've been a bad selection for me this year, whether I go against them or go for them. They've been hit or miss for me this year, so I'm not I don't trust the Seminoles. I do trust Florida a little bit more. All right, you're going to have a fresh look. No Dan Mullen. The players are going to go all out. They're going to play for themselves. I believe that mentality is real. They're going to try to finish out this season on a positive note. And if they win, they're going to go to a bowl game anyway. Same goes for Florida State. But this game is in Gainesville. So give me the Florida Gators minus 2.5 over Florida State. This line actually really surprised me when I saw this. But Penn State at Michigan, by the way, Penn State is a slight favorite on the road. Now, this could just be because Michigan State got blown out by Ohio State, and they've lost to Purdue recently as well. Basically lost 2 of their last 3. I get it, but Penn State's the favorite. They beat Rutgers last week. Now, I know I just praised my alma mater just about 2 minutes ago, but Penn State shut out Rutgers at home. I mean, come on. And now all of a sudden they're favorites. I mean, if they want to play, well, James Franklin's locked in, gives the team an extra boost. Well, Mel Tucker's locked in for Michigan State for the next 10 years as well. So I don't know where this comes from, but across the board, they're favorites by 1.5 or even 2. Across the board, Penn State's the favorite across the board. I don't get this at all. So unless I'm missing something, you're going to give me Michigan State plus 1.5 here at home, hosting Penn State. It's a rivalry game for these two schools, so they're playing for a trophy. But I like the Spartans here. They'll finish 10-2, and they're going to be, of course, unfortunately, 1 game behind Ohio State or Michigan when it's all said and done after today, of course, because Michigan and Ohio State are playing for the East Division title to go to the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis. But give me Michigan State here, plus 1.5 over Penn State. All right, game number 4, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State. This one's going to be in Stillwater. This is at Boone Pickens Stadium. Home of the Cowboys. They are a 4-point favorite. Both teams only have 1 loss on the year, but Oklahoma State's been the more consistent team this season. I really cannot trust Oklahoma. I'm surprised this line's not a little bit bigger, but again, it's a rivalry game. Oklahoma is still a very good football team, but I don't trust the Sooners, and usually when I say that, it goes the other way, but I will roll with the home team here. In Oklahoma State, minus 4 at home against the Sooners. So give me the Cowboys, Mike Gundy, and that mullet is going to get into the Big 12 title game and possibly the college football playoff. If they win out, they could very well sneak in there. It is possible. Don't rule it out for Oklahoma State. By the way, Oklahoma is number 10, so I don't think Oklahoma is not totally out of it, but they would need more to happen. Oklahoma State, if they win this game and then, of course, win the Big 12 title, they would probably propel themselves up to no less than number 5. I don't know about number 4. It's just going to depend on what else happens over the next 2 weeks, which includes today. But give me Oklahoma State minus 4. Now, Cal at USC is my final game. And my trend today, which I actually just noticed here, I was just kind of throwing these games out on paper when I was dissecting them throughout the week. I happen to be going with all home teams here, whether they're favorites or underdogs. And usually I hate doing that. I try to divvy it up. I went with a lot of road teams last week, by the way. 4 road teams, which got me 3 wins. Not good enough, but it's something. We were above 500 last week. Cal at UCLA. I like Chip Kelly's squad. I have all season long. We had UCLA last week, minus 3 at USC. They won that one by a lot. So we're going to keep the UCLA train rolling here, minus 6.5. At home against Cal. Chip Kelly will get his team to 8 wins. No Pac-12 championship game this year, but 8-4, and then a nice little bowl game. That's a solid season for Chip Kelly and company. I would say this team could very well be 9-4 at the end of the year. Kelly is either going to sign some sort of extension with UCLA at the end of the season, or maybe somehow Washington prize him away. But I think he's building something very strong at UCLA. Now again, he has some veterans on that team, but the way he's been able to really build up this program over the last 2 years after going through the mud and going through some ruts and the dark days, really, when he had to basically rebuild this program from scratch, he's doing a nice job, and you'd like to see that out there for Pac-12 football and, of course, UCLA. So give me UCLA minus 6.5 over Cal. All right, quick recap. We have Rutgers plus 1.5 over Maryland. Florida minus 2.5 over Florida State. Michigan State plus 1.5 over Penn State. Oklahoma State minus 4 over Oklahoma, and we have UCLA minus 6.5 over Cal. It's rivalry weekend, folks. Enjoy it. Enjoy all the great college football this week. This is our last regular season show of the season. Next week we'll preview the conference championship games, and we're going to start getting into the college football postseason, as we'll know what the playoff entails after the conference championship games. next week, and we'll see the top four. We're going to see a lot of the bowl games, and we're going to go from there as we're already heading in towards the winter here of the college football season, and all of a sudden the 2021 year is going to be over, and then we're on to 2022. It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun. All right, that's going to do it for me. Tune in next week, 8 a.m., same time right here on AM 1490. This is College Football Pick'em. Enjoy the games today, folks. You've been listening to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490, Sports Betting Radio.